Ladies and gentlemen, come to order if you will, please. We have, this is the Income Tax Subcommittee of Ways and Means, of course, and Chair Williamson is not with us, so I'll be chairing this. We do have one bill today, HB 1195. Ms. Kendrick is here, ready to present. So,
okay, thank you. Put on my glasses so I look a little smarter here.
you look very smart.
Okay, thank you.
With or without the glasses.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. So this is House Bill 1195, and what this would do would give a tax credit to individuals who work for companies that are in rural counties. It would be $4,000 up to $12,000 maximum if they go through a workforce readiness program through the Georgia Department of Labor. And so let me tell you a little bit about why a city girl is carrying a rural bill before that gets asked. So I worked with the Chairman Blackman, and many of you know I do a lot of work around technology and serve on the technology committee and help a lot of tech companies raise money in my capacity as a corporate attorney. And so we had an individual who was with a nonprofit that attended one of my technology conferences, and he represents a lot of workforce in rural counties. And so we met with Chairman Blackman on last year, and we had a bigger bill that covered small businesses, any workforce development throughout the state of Georgia. And so going back and forth with Chairman Blackman, we really wanted to narrow down the bill because we understand the implications of tax credits to the overall budget, and so this was the result of negotiations over the summer. Many of you may know as well, I serve on the Georgia Technology Authority Overview Committee with two other of our colleagues, really focusing on broadband over the summer and how to implement funds, federal funds for that. So this is something that's very, very important to me to make sure that we are retooling and making sure that our rural communities have the tools that they need in order not only for small businesses to continue to thrive, but also that individuals are taking advantage of advancing technologies. And so that is the gist of the bill, and I answer any questions.
All right. Well done, Representative. Do we have questions?
Thank you. Thank you,
Chairman
Newton. No, I appreciate the bill. I was just wondering on line 30 if you could that pays above at or above the average hourly of the county with the lowest. That's the lowest in the entire state, or the particular county where they're working, or when it's the definition of a.
So the way that it's worded now is the lowest average hourly wage throughout the state.
Okay. And that's just to make sure it's at least above the average, or meets the average for the.
Right, and a lot of this language comes, sort of from other tax credits where we provide similar sort of incentives.
Thank you. Good.
Representative Fry, or you? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the bill, and being from a rural and metro area, I really appreciate this, trying to get those high-tech jobs in the rural areas. However, I don't see a cap on this right here, and or a sunset. And I do have a recommendation for an amendment, Mr. Chairman, if whenever the time is proper, to sort of just again recommend it.
Well, I move do pass, then
Okay.
where we can get it second, the second move.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
None.
Now time for the amendment.
The amendment is to add a $2 million per year cap on this tax credit, and maybe a 5-year sunset, and then we can come.
Do you have a suggested wording on that? The line.
We'll probably add it round the line 50, maybe at the end of line 50, add a and I may need lead counsel probably to help me out here where the best place to add it.
So the intention is to do a $2 million cap and
Per year.
sunset it,
Yes, sir.
and sunset it when?
5 years, a 5-year sun, 2030.
Could Ledge Council help us out with that?
There will be the question about, do they prorate it to people who apply in advance for this, if they want to make sure that it's available, or there's a lot of language that they'd have to add in that wouldn't be as, if it's going to be a pre-approval process, maybe you don't need a pre-approval process, I'm just.
Would you restate the amendment since the chairman was out?
The amendment is basically to add a $2 million cap per year and a 5-year sunset. So the sunset's 2030.
Do we need official wording for that before?
Sure.
Got some other questions?
You gotta hit my mic.
Hit his mic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. I think what would be probably the easiest posture for us to be in if the committee is, approves the substance of the legislation, that we work on this between now and full committee or the next committee and get it worded properly and then get it voted out if that's the will of the committee. But I do think you've worked really, really hard on this. You and I have talked a number of times and found a way to try to do something that's going to help small business and help folks that want to go to rural Georgia and hit these small businesses and help with the IT world. So thank you for your work on
Thank
this.
you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move do pass, before you step in the room, so I can withdraw that if the intention is to get the language perfected to add the cap and the sunset.
Full committee.
We can do it before.
Yeah, if that's amenable to everybody, I think, make sure we have the parts that are moving parts all correct. And
Pass it out.
Pass it.
and if, we pass out as is, we'll get those adjustments and get them done.
So then my motion do pass stands for the measure as is currently written.
We have some other questions. Is it Chairman Knight or?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the author, just looking at, starting on line 15, where we're defining employer, and again, a lot of times we see a lot of these business entities, if you will, or perhaps others, but I'm looking at association, a trust, business trust, real estate trust, but particularly any other form of organization and its affiliates. Could you help me understand what that may be?
You mean the affiliates part or the
Well,
association?
both, like any other form of organization and its affiliates.
For example, this is how I read it. One of the types of businesses that's, not that I don't see quite included in here is something that says sole proprietorship. So I'm assuming any form of organization is.
Line 16.
Well, I see it. So sole proprietorship is a little different than proprietorship, at least from my legal standpoint. So I'm assuming that the other form of organization is maybe any other form that we didn't cover, maybe the limited liability partnership that's not specifically listed, or specifically a sole proprietorship. And then anyone that, might be affiliated with that, but they still have to be registered and have that federal EIN that's attached to it. So they will have to organize under, under the state of Georgia.
Well, and again, I'll end this comment because I know we've got to get on with more. But as I look at some of these, and we're looking at rural Georgia, I know we have, as a committee, applaud this kind of effort because we're trying to get jobs, into our rural communities. But some of these forms in here, I'm just trying to, curious about how many jobs, because usually we're looking at entities that have, a lot of employees, but as you look at a data scientist and things like that that are described in here, I'm trying to be curious about what the author's intent was when you talk about these specific jobs, how they go into a rural area, but I appreciate the author's effort on this. So with that, I know we've got to get on with our business.
And just to briefly, so a lot of the jobs that you see are within the gap. So Georgia has literally probably 20 to 30,000 plus jobs that are in high demand, high tech jobs, and we just don't have enough people trained in order to fulfill them. So that really zeroes in on sort of the high demand tech jobs specifically. Did you?
If you get my microphone, I'll try to answer that question too. Mr. Chairman, if try to answer the question, I think just follow up on what Representative Kendrick was saying, and it was, I think, intentionally crafted relatively broad because we don't necessarily know where all these high tech and AI and some of these things are going, but I think the specific component is when you talk about this high tech and you craft it down into small business and rural. So
Yes.
may not help, but a little bit of an answer there. Thank you.
We have another question, mic number 2. I'm not sure who that is. That's waved. We're back to mic number 8.
I think there's
that's
a lot
over.
of
Okay.
waving going on.
Okay. 10 is waving.
I just was going to ask real quick on line 50, where it says that no individual can get more than 12,000. I'm curious, how does somebody get more than 4,000?
So for 3 years.
This is an individual. This isn't
Correct.
for the corporation
It's
that
for
hires them.
individual
This is for the
tax credit.
individual to help encourage this program, which sounds great. I'm just curious how it's limited to 12,000 for an individual. Is that?
So 4,000 each year, so you can get up to 3 years essentially.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so you can renew it for
Right.
For
But
up to
12
3 years.
yeah,
For,
but
okay, so
12,000
it's a
cap.
it's a significant
Right.
to get them in rural counties
Right.
with the high tech. Thank you very much for that.
Okay, I see no other lights flashing. Now, are we in a position to move to amend now, or move to pass?
Yeah. I think your motion to amend may be accepted because I believe Ledge Council has got some language that we can do right now. So just we'll adjust on the fly if you've got that.
Can you remind me what the aggregate limit was proposed? 2 million?
2 million.
Okay. So after line 54, we would add a new paragraph 4 that reads, "In no event shall the aggregate limit of tax credits allowed under this code section for any year exceed $2 million."
I think
And
we
then-
can further amend.
After line 62, add a new subsection F that reads, "This code section shall be repealed on December 31st, 2029.
Okay. That is the amendment. Is any discussion on the amendment?
Second the amendment.
I need a second, of course, yes.
I just question if December 31st, 2029, that would be technically 5.5 years. I mean, I don't know. Or the sunset, I guess it comes effective. Starts January 1, okay.
These companies are gonna need a little time to get established in the rural areas, so any amount of time we give them would be appreciated, I'm sure.
Mr. Chairman, I love the measure and appreciate the representative's hard work on this. My only question is, if it's somehow oversubscribed, do we prorate, or is it first come, first served?
I think that The default would probably end up in a first come, first serve, Christie, or am I interpreting that incorrectly? Yeah, the department would figure that out, so you'd have the DOL, I guess, but,
If you wanna vote on the amendment now, still discuss.
yeah, I think we can probably adjust that as needed, between now and the next time we see the, see the bill, so.
We have a motion and a second on the amendment. Any other discussion? If you favor the amendment, please vote aye.
Aye.
If you oppose it, please vote no. And there's no opposition. The amendment passes. Now we'll vote on the bill, on a do pass.
As amended.
As amended. There is a motion. Do we have a second on that? We have a second. Any discussion on the do pass motion? I don't see any. If you favor the do pass recommendation, please say aye.
Aye.
If you oppose it, say no. And the motion passes.
Thank you.
That is all
Thank
we
you.
have, I believe, Mr. Chairman.
Good.
This Income Tax Subcommittee stands adjourned.
Yeah, we move into David will jump in.
Thank you, members of the committee. Appreciate it.
Uh, 11:15. Yeah, thank you. We'll call the Valorem Tax Committee to order. First on our agenda is House Bill 98. Actually, it was a bill that I dropped, but I believe Chairman Blackman is going to address that now.
Thank you. We've seen several states that have implemented a volunteer program with their seniors at the local level in order to offset property tax. And so what this bill would do would be at a rate of $10 an hour up to $500, or the overall tax burden at the property tax level for the citizens to reduce that amount. And they would do this on a volunteer basis. This is something new, and it essentially functions like a homestead exemption. But there are a number of states, and this closely follows what we've seen happen in South Carolina and Colorado, But I think Maine and Massachusetts and other states are looking at this and have done this. But anyway, it's a program whereby they can either work at with the schools, with the county, or in a volunteer basis to reduce their property tax. So that's the essence of the bill. Take any questions if there are any, Mr. Chairman. I know it's first hearing. Give some people some time to absorb it. This was dropped, but in order to go ahead and get it heard, we put it in HB 98.
Thank you. Mike 3, who's that? Chairman Martin.
Chairman Blackman, so basically by doing this, this would be if somebody went out there and worked 10 hours at $10 an hour, $100, they would somehow apply that to their bill with no tax implications. That's what we're trying to work on here, right?
In a perfect world, I don't know that you can offset any federal tax implication.
Well, that was you're heading where I was. Do we need to say that or it may be in this bill? I just got it that this would not incur any state tax obligation.
I think that would be a reasonable thing to add. I think I think we have age. Is it 65 listed? Is that?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so, there is a qualification there at the state level already for an exemption on income tax, but it might be worth making this in addition to.
That was just.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Mike 7, who's that?
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have not studied this bill at all, but would this require the tax assessors or the county government to provide a 1099?
Well, that's what we were mentioning.
Yeah,
is
you
that
were
I don't think there's any workaround for any federal taxation on this.
So
no.
they would end up having to, because since technically it'd be compensation, they'd have to issue a 1099.
There would be a liability.
Well, I take that back. 1099 is only if you earn over 600 above.
So you don't have to 1099 on this.
Don't ask, don't tell.
Lord.
Of course, you can issue a 1099 if you so choose. You just don't have to.
Any other discussions for the author? All right. Mr. Chairman, first hearing, so I think we've got
Yes,
some
sir.
things some issues or the brought up questions. So with that, if there are no other discussions, we'll get on to the next measure.
Thank you.
And the next measure will be H.R. 1041. This is Chairman Washburn. Are you here? There you are. All right. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee. This is House Resolution 1041, LC 280615. This resolution proposes a constitutional amendment that would allow the option, and we stress the word option, for local governments to use a different method of assessing property values for the purpose of ad valorem taxation. I would like to point out that there were 50 co-signers on this bill, and I was very pleased with that. This came out of our ad valorem tax study committee that we had last summer. We had 2 days of hearings, and this idea was presented there and was received well by the members of the subcommittee. It does propose a constitutional amendment, of course. Let's voters decide about this, and it is an option. We think it's a good measure. Basically, it would, and I'll give you more of the reasons why we think it would be good. It would freeze the existing assessments as they are, and they would not increase again until the property is sold. When the property sells, the purchase price would be the new assessed value. There is no purer way to value real estate and letting the free market work and placing those values there as that results. There are a couple of provisions that you would need to know about before I talk about what we think the benefits are. This would be voluntary, of course, and then after 5 years, the governing authority could either by their vote decide not to continue it, or bill provides that they could have a referendum about whether or not to continue it. The bill also provides that if there's a substantial addition or renovation to the property in excess of $50,000, the property gets reassessed at that point, and then the clock starts again in terms of the purchase price doing that. And so that is the bill. We believe that there are several good opportunities here. One is the public, the property owners that pay these taxes. It's my experience after 48 years in the real estate business and 20 years of teaching real estate licensing courses that the general public is quite confused by the whole process of the assessment process and how it works and the appeals process. We believe that if counties went to this process, that the appeals would go to almost zero, because who is going to come in and argue that the property is not worth what they have paid for it? So we think it lowers administrative cost relative to the tax assessment process, and again reduces the number of appeals to the Board of Equalization as well as to the Superior Court. Again, this is an option, and I'd be glad to take any questions about the bill.
Thank you. We've got Mike 3. Who is that? Chairman Martin.
Thank you. Representative, this applies to all property, right?
It does apply to all property. Thank you for noting that, Mr. Chairman.
So I have a question. So if in your additions is to real property, correct? So if I have a building that I built in, a city, and this starts in 2024, and don't make any substantive changes to that building for 10 years, 20 years, the real estate for 20 years, and it runs, a pharmacy or a grocery store. I'm taxed at the 2024 value. If I come in, the guy across the street, or maybe let's do a gas station. Gas station's better. I have a gas station there. It has a physical property. I buy the property, build it there. It's taxed at that rate. 20 years later, somebody's going to compete with me across the corner. They build their gas station. They're paying a price for that property 20 years later. In the world we live in, that could be double, triple. It could be 4 times in Metro Atlanta. So this guy's paying taxes at the 2024 level. This guy's paying 4 times that. How do we foot that in terms of a level business environment?
Well, it's a good question, Mr. Chairman. We believe that if this system is put in place, and it is optional, of course, but we believe if it's put in place, that the digest will steadily rise. There will be some circumstances where people own property for a long time and their taxes do stay at that level, but that is the case now.
No, sir. Respectfully, it's not. You pay the same millage rate. If my value that I paid for the property is $100 and somebody else paid $400 and they're paying the same millage, the operation of that second gas station is 4 times in the ad valorem tax expense column that the other one. We do not have that now.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, you cut me off before I could finish. What I meant to say is that, as we all know, there are circumstances here with various homestead exemptions and different things where property taxes are paid at different levels. Now it's done by the tax assessors assessing those values. This lets the pure free market work. I understand the concern, but if our goal here is to establish a good growing digest for local governments to get the revenue they need to operate, then we just believe this is a good option to do that. I do understand your question, and it is true that somebody could have a long-term property that they own that would be frozen at a particular assessment.
A follow-up, at your meeting this summer, didn't we hear, I think it was Columbus, testify that They had people in Columbus that a large percentage of their residential property base, in fact, paid no property tax now because of the freeze they had put in place
That is
number
true.
of years ago.
That is true. We did hear that from them.
Didn't they also testify that was the worst thing they had ever done for the community at large?
We did hear that from Columbus, but that is for homestead only, for one thing, which our bill takes care of all types of property, including timberland, farmland, shopping centers, everything besides homestead. Also, I might point out with this that Chatham County, as I understand it, has a floating homestead, and as the assessed values rise, the homestead follows it. So they are in effect de facto doing just what this proposes, except it operates that way. I think we have a number of floating homestead exemptions. So this is a different method. He proposes to let the market work, let the market speak, and we believe the tax digest will rise steadily, and it's just a different method of valuing those properties.
Well, just quick follow-up again. I want to try to understand. You're right about the floating homesteads. We have them in Fulton County, and as your assessment goes up, your homestead goes up with it, and that protects the homeowner. But to your point about the tax digest rising, if there's not sales going on, if you've frozen it, I don't see how the tax digest rises except for the new growth that comes in, right? So again, if I'm at the old gas station and I'm paying $100, I think it would actually potentially be a detriment to new building in the area, because I'm going to pay 4 times as much as the gas station across the street. How am I going to sell my gas at the same? But I'll leave it with this: is how does this foot in, Chairman Blackman, with what Chairman Camp has with the statewide floating homestead? It seems like that would be a bit of a competition if those both ended up on the ballot this fall.
Yeah, my take is that the committee has some work to do to decide what the preference might be, unless we want the full House to determine as much. But I mean, I think there's a long process for both of these bills to continue to have to go through. I know that Representative Washburn chaired the ad hoc committee, and I know he feels very passionately about this issue, and he's worked very hard on this particular one. It's a comprehensive property tax, offset versus more of a homestead based permissive offset. So, I think it certainly, with 50 co-signers, he's done some homework here and has some support. So we'll just have to take inventory of that.
On those lines, Representative Washington, can you tell me that since this is applying to commercial property, does this then remove the other type of valuation for a commercial property, the income valuation? So it takes that away, because that currently is at the option of the taxpayer, right? The taxpayer can say, I want my property value set on the income it generates or the value it is. So this would just say it's what you paid for it.
This is what you pay for it, and I appreciate Chairman Blackman's pointing out that Representative Camp's bill is for homestead only. This is for everything, and that's one of the significant parts of this bill. Also, too, I think we should point out that there are some properties that are not sold for long periods of time, but basically the marketplace at work, homestead properties are sold probably on an average of every 7 years or so. Also, other properties are sold. There are some that are kept for long periods of time. But there is no better indicator of real value than letting the marketplace work. There is a question about the long-term effects of freezing that. But we believe that it's the purest way to assess it. And as to your question about, I'm not aware of the taxpayer being able to go in and tell the tax assessor much of anything about how he wants his property valued. I will tell you that the general public does not understand this system, and they feel like they are floundering around, and they're having tax increases all the time because of reevaluations.
Yeah.
And they're getting hit with the reevaluation and a millage rate increase. We believe this is a purer way to assess it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, yeah, I agree it's complicated, but there are, you know, we want to make sure that we're looking at the bill because we want to make sure that, you know, we get it right. And there's a lot of different nuances. So with that, we're going to move on to, we've got several, Chairman Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the bill and the effort. The one question I have, we have had times when homes have gone down in value, where they're 07, 08, and then frankly, there was some 2021 and all, there were some prices that the home may not be worth that. And then somebody mentioned gas stations. Used to a half acre on a corner was good. Now that's not near enough, and some of them with underground storage tanks may not be worth what they paid for them. There are situations. Does this bill allow, if someone does think perhaps they overpaid during a frothy time in the real estate market for a home, or the real changes, other than having to do $50,001 in improvements, is there a way for someone to request a reappraisal if they think their home or their property is no longer worth what they paid for it? Maybe it's depreciated, whatever. Is that allowed in this bill, or is it really you just have to do an improvement to get an assessment, an updated assessment?
It is a two-edged sword. The value is set by what you paid for it, and there's no way to come back and ask for that it be reduced. So it is true that if you have some dramatic decrease in value by this bill, the most recent purchase price is what the assessed value is.
And the local community couldn't amend that portion. They either got to pass it as is.
Yeah. The bill, one of the parts of the bill that I think is significant, if the local government decides to, if the constitutional amendment passes and local government decides to go with this method, after 5 years, if the county commission wants to undo this and go back to the previous method, they can, or they can put that to a local referendum, let the voters decide about that.
I like that. Thank you for this.
Real quick, committee, we've got limited time, obviously a busy day today. Representative Washburn, I think there are some questions that are real questions, and I would ask at this point that members of the committee, would you please, let's get with Representative Washburn and express or ask any questions that you think need to be addressed, okay? Obviously, this is the first hearing. Representative Washburn has put a lot of time and effort into this. It is the second hearing. We've still got questions. I don't know what.
Yeah, I think it's better to get those answered.
Yeah, at this point there are a lot of questions. Okay, and I share some of those. Representative, we talked offline, but let's get with Representative Washburn and see if we can get some of these questions answered. And you know, if we can, we'll try to come back and make sure that we perfected the bill. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right. With that, we've got one last measure on the agenda, and that's HR 1115. Chairman Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two bills I get to talk about today. I think with the housing environment being what it is, and we have seen a varied way that locals are implementing the local taxes on these particular developments. It has come up before. This committee, when Jay Powell was chairing, has passed legislation that would implement a separate designation. But has come back based on interpretations needing a constitutional amendment. And I know Chairman Leverett brought this a couple of sessions back. I know Mr. Tony is here and can probably speak in greater depth and in more detail. But in short, that's what this would do. We'll try to answer any questions. And being a first hearing, I know we can probably keep it rather light today, but I believe Mr. Tony's here to speak to it.
All right. Mr. Tony, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Blackman. Jet Tony, representing the Georgia Affordable Housing Coalition. The General Assembly passed the state low-income housing tax credit in 2000. near unanimous vote in both House and Senate. The first projects under the federal and state credit began to come online 2 years after that. Immediately, Lowndes County assessor levied an egregious assessment on properties, LIHTC properties in that county. Those assessments were litigated at the board level, the county level, the Superior Court level, went up to the appeals court level. 3 times these questions have gone to either the Court of Appeals or to the Supreme Court. This is over now a 23-year period. Each time that the coalition I represent has come to you, the members of the General Assembly, you have passed legislation that clearly defines how assessors are to assess, value these unique rent-controlled properties that are built under a strict federal and state set of guidelines. And 3 times the legislation was litigated. The last time that the J. Powell bill was litigated, the Supreme Court of Georgia ruled that the legislation is indeed constitutional. In all these years, with discussions with the ACCG and with other interested parties, including the Department of Revenue, Mr. Austin Gibbons' predecessors and the agency heads, the revenue commissioners, have told us and have told you that the only way to get a clear sense of how the properties are to be assessed is to adopt a constitutional amendment to create these properties as a special and unique class. If this legislation, this resolution, is adopted by the General Assembly and put on the ballot, if the voters approve it, then you as the members of the General Assembly will finally have final authority on how the properties will be assessed. I will give you one egregious example of bizarre and totally inconsistent assessment. Fulton County assesses a 70-door LIHTC property in South Fulton at around $40,000 in taxes. This is now 5 years ago. DeKalb County assesses the same property, same number of doors, for $270,000 in taxes. It's not a matter of where the real estate is. The properties are not, there's not some special place. It's not the location in this sense. It's the same architectural footprint with that much deviation, and we can give you countless examples across multiple counties where this has occurred. I will not speak for ACCG, but I believe Mr. Mueller is in the room, and he would also agree that a constitutional amendment is necessary so that you, the members of the General Assembly, can finally put to rest how these unique properties should be assessed. And it is not a matter of the developers and owners of these properties not wanting to pay taxes. It's just that when you make a 30-year commitment to rent control to the federal and state government, a developer cannot anticipate the wild mood swings of assessors. There has to be a plan from the very start of the application for an award of credits at DCA. And so thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Tony. I know I'm one of the ones that have helped in the past on that. No matter what the issue is how can you assess something? My recollection from dealing with this is they're actually levying the value of the credit. I mean, there's no other way around it, and that is not, I'm not sure how you place a assessment on a credit. Again, this is about the income from the rental of those units, which is controlled. You enter into agreement that says these are rent-controlled units, and that you cannot charge any more, rent. So how they keep going up, but it's not reflective of the rent control that's there. So thank you. We've got a question or two, and then I don't know who signed up or if anybody signed up to speak on the bill. Real quick, 3.
Yes, my question was just, are we in a posture that we would move this today? If not, the question can wait.
Yeah, we're we're at a first hearing, so we can move forward on.
I was just going to suggest that while we're doing this, that there's another class of property we might do to help our homeowners in the state. It's companies buying residential properties and coming in and swooping in with corporate cash offers. They're essentially running businesses out of single family residential neighborhoods and making it hard for people to buy. That would be a great opportunity to classify that as a class of property and to be taxed like a business, but for a different day. It's just running up the cost to our people. You got an offer on and somebody swoops in with cash.
Let's see, 7. Who's that? Representative Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, thank you for bringing this, Jet. We've been working on this since I've been here.
Yes, sir.
A million times. Little question is, what is that definition? You would think I would know this, but in 26 U.S.C. Section 42G1, qualified low-income housing project, is that specifically a multifamily, or is it a single family, or what's that?
Multifamily.
Okay.
Thank you. Chairman, would you same mic, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Tony, my question is similar to what Representative Fry asked. Give us an example. Would this include all federally subsidized housing projects, including all? Why wouldn't a Section 8 project be? I understand you come in a different part of the tax code, but it's
Right.
federally subsidized housing.
Right.
But what we used to refer to as Section 8, where it's basically a voucher type program for the tenants there, is still federally subsidized. Would not a Section 8 housing project be eligible under the definition of this, or is it only going to apply to the?
My understanding is that Section 8, as an economic development program, a construction program, is gone. And that began in the Reagan years when the first low-income housing tax credit was passed by Congress to encourage private investment in these properties and get state and federal governments out of the construction business. There are Section 8 properties. There are a few what are called project-level Section 8 properties where the federal government might inject some funding. But mostly Section 8 is a voucher. You said it. It's a voucher.
Yeah, not to interrupt, but there's still project-based 50. There's a 50-unit complex in Monroe that's still subsidized by under the old terms, very, very similar to what we used to call Section 8. Would that project be eligible for this?
It's my understanding that it would not,
I
unless.
don't quite understand because it's rent controlled effectively.
Well, I would love for this amendment to use other terms rather than low-income housing. But this is what Legislative Council 3 times now has told the legislature. This is the language that has to be included to restrict it to the Section 42 low-income housing tax credit program. And that's the only answer I can give you, because that's the answer the Legislative Council has given.
You could always insert the word socialized. Socialism, government-funded housing. But I thank you for answering my question. So, to the best of your knowledge, the project-based Section 8 facilities would not be covered.
That is my understanding, but that's not a question that I can answer.
Yeah, we're gonna do one more, and then we'll. I think our time is getting near. Who's on 5? That was the next. Chairman Carson.
Thank you for this, and Jed, I know you and I have talked about this number of years. I just want to remind the committee that this is a huge issue. I was just going through the numbers that you just mentioned. 240,000 of taxes assessed on that 70-door property. So divided by 70 doors, divided by 12 months, that's $286 per door per month just in property taxes. I just want to mention that. And I'm not saying the value is not that the units are not worth that or they are worth that. What I understand is that systemically, these counties are basically putting a valuation on the state and on the state, possibly as well the federal low-income housing tax credits. That is meant to be a financing mechanism, not a property valuation. Is that correct, Mr. Tony? Or?
That is, and let me equate this to something that's personal to everyone in this room who owns their own home. Would you stand for your mortgage, your original mortgage amount being added on to the assessor's valuation of your property and then pay tax on that? You would not stand for it, nor would the General Assembly allow it. But that's what is occurring on these properties.
So just as an example, if we have a $500,000 home with a $400,000 mortgage at 80%, the first year you're talking about the valuation, the assessment would be on $900,000, which would be $500,000 for the house plus the $400,000 the financing mechanism, much like this credit. Correct?
That's correct.
So we can like this state credit, or we can dislike it, or the federal credit, we can dislike that as well. Regardless, those credits are being factored into the valuation. That's why this House resolution from Jeremy Blackman is necessary. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you so much.
All right. I think still some questions, but what time are we at? We've got to respect.
The hour is late.
The hour is late, and we've got to respect the time because obviously it's a full day. So we'll continue with this discussion, but that will do it for the Ways and Means Ad Valorem Tax Committee today. We are adjourned.
subcommittees up here. Good morning, everyone. We have a sign-up sheet over here. We'll call the meeting of the Ways and Means Sales Tax Subcommittee to order. We have one item on the agenda this morning, HB 1192, LC 500779S. Is that right, Chairman Carson? That's a no, so that's the item we have on the agenda this morning. That's the only item we have on the agenda. So without objection, we'll move forward with that as our agenda. Chairman Carson, you want to tell us about your proposition, LC 500779S?
Absolutely. So this is in regard to the high-tech data centers. This is the sales tax exemption under paragraph 68.1 in Title 48 in regard to sales tax exemptions. There's an exemption currently on the books. I think it was first adopted in 18, if I'm not mistaken. I think Representative Kelly carried that legislation. And then it was subsequently amended in the 22 session. What we're doing here is basically taking a pause on this exemption and reassessing it. What this does is it pauses any new certificates on or after July 1st of 2024, except for certain high-tech data centers that are subject to an ongoing contract that was entered onto prior to July 1st, 2024. In other words, there's two types of, in regard to structure, there's many sizes or what have you, but in regard to structure, you're talking about either single tenant high-tech data centers such as something that works for just a corporation or what have you, but also you're talking about co-located facilities. And so what we're saying is we're taking a pause after July 1st, 2024 to reassess the state policy in regard to this sales tax exemption. As you know, these high-tech data centers demand a lot of power off the grid. And what we're doing is we're just taking a pause in regard to the sales tax exemption, and that's on the equipment. There's hundreds of millions of dollars worth of computer equipment that go into these high-tech data centers. With that, I understand there might be some amendment language from the chairman, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Committee have any questions? Microphone 3. Yes, sir. Chairman Parsons.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman Carson, I just wanted to, I think this is actually the second hearing on this, isn't that correct?
It is, yes.
And you had mentioned this morning, as you had mentioned in the first, about the usage of these data centers on electricity.
Demand on the grid, yes.
Demand on the grid. I did want to point out at a meeting that you attended just a couple of days ago that Georgia Power testified in that meeting that these data centers are not going to be a problem, that they have everything under control, and that there is no energy shortage. There won't be, and these and specifically, as I recall, they mentioned these data centers. I mean, I know that we have to look at the financial impact on the state and other considerations, but I did want to point that out.
Yes, thank you.
Further questions? Number 2, Trey Kelly, Representative Katie waves. Number 7.
Yes,
yes, sir.
Chairman Carson, so you're basically saying we're hitting the pause button on entertaining it. We're not.
Yes, that's correct.
Do you, for further question, do you have any hesitancy about the signal this sends to businesses that we're kind of changing the time frame of what these projects
I
were
very much
expecting?
do, yes. The current sunset goes through, I believe, December 31st of 2031. I believe this more, like I said, I know I've said it several times again, but this is about the state reassessing this sales tax exemption if we're getting an investment back for the taxpayer. But I understand the point. In regard to land contracts and business contracts and business continuity, I understand your concern.
My only question is, we're very proud of the fact that we've been the #1 state in which to do business now for a decade.
I understand.
And part of the reason we've earned that is that we deliver on our promises. And my only concern is that I'm fine, we've got to protect the taxpayer's wallet, but at the same time, we don't want to be change the rules at halftime either. So just got a little bit of concern about that.
I just was going to speak to Chairman Carson's mention, as we look at a pause on this, we do have a proposed outline for a task force or study committee, commission, as we are able to weave this in appropriately. And I know I've talked to Chairman Parsons about coming together and getting the right people on it, so that some of the questions that are lingering and that have been brought up here in the first hearing and that have today can get answered, and we can move forward with the right decision for the taxpayer and for the state of Georgia.
Thank you, Chairman Blackman. I do just want to make this statement, and to the author of the bill, if I'm incorrect, there is a runway here. We heard earlier at the first hearing that, what about, we're moving dirt, we have things running. There's a runway until July 1st, 2024 for folks that are in process to get with the Revenue Department and get their certificates issued, right, Chairman Blackman?
Along with the survivability of contracts that are with those certified prior to.
Exactly. So this is really a pause. As Chairman Blackman said, that there's going to be outlined a working group, so that the works that are in progress can continue. Are there further questions by the committee? All right. Representative Kelly is back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a question. I waved on it, and then it kind of came up. I know we were talking about the power grid, and I know this is our second hearing. I wanted to make sure I haven't missed anything. Is anyone from the PSC or Georgia Power or the EMCs came before this committee to talk about this issue?
As far as come before the
well, let me just answer that. No.
Will they be at full committee if the bill moves forward?
That would be up to them and Chairman Blackman.
I remember a lot of them being in a room for one of Chairman Parsons' committee earlier talking about the power grid. I just didn't know if they cared enough about this for it or not.
We had some folks in there. Number 10. Number 10. Chairman Camp.
Chairman Blackman actually answered my question. So.
Oh, I'm sorry, I cut you off just a little bit too when I heard wave. No, number 8, Chairman Knight. Or Chair, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would it make any sense, since the sun sets out to 2031, would it make any sense, instead of just stopping everything, to move that a shorter sunset? And it looks like we're still in the game, but and make that sunset 3 years, 2 years, or whatever, instead of just completely cutting it off. Just a thought. Would that help?
I guess that's a matter of policy that this committee will take under advisement today, but I would suggest that this keeps things going on and leaves that sunset. If the work that's done in the off session comes back and there's not an issue, then the pause goes away next year and the sunset stays where it was. So there's actually a longer runway in the future. So I think one could look at it in both directions, but that's a policy decision each and every member will have to make for themselves. Number 7.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just one comment is related to the energy, and I think this task force is one of the charges is grid and supply for the data center location. And I think this goes back to electricity. And this is the issue that I brought up, and I know that these data centers are coming in order to be, I guess, net neutral or carbon net neutral, whatever. A lot of times they are getting the tax subsidies then to go and invest in these solar panel big areas. I dare not call them farms, but part of what I would say that this panel ought to look at is when these companies come in, they're also putting demand on these, for new solar panel installations. And, that may not be something that in some of the areas where these are going that is a concern, but I can tell you in rural Georgia, where they are taking farmland, is being gobbled up because of the large amount of subsidies that are coming in here for the solar panels, because that is a direct result of a project of a data center that wants to say it's, net neutral or whatever. We're going to put back on the grid what the electricity we take. This is a big concern, and I would say the study committee is maybe right on with what it's doing to look at and address this.
Are there any further questions of the gentleman before we go to? I see none. We're going to go to people. Well, we're going to take. Can we take the test and then I'll come back? Well, go ahead. I mean, if you've got something.
Since we're going to do a study committee, would it make sense to put that on or after July 1, 2025, then do the study committee, and then decide what we're going to do instead of cutting it off and then having a study committee after the fact?
Well, again, that's a matter of policy for us today. That's not what was before us today. I would suggest this, and then we're going to go to the speakers on the bill. This industry is heated. The incentives are normally to stimulate an industry. I think with the advent of AI, one just needs to look at some of the things going on in the stock market. NVIDIA is reporting earnings today, a super microcomputer. These companies are really growing. So when one looks at the incentive is to bring the companies here, we want to be careful. This is just me, in my opinion, as government interfering in the normal economics of business. And when you subsidize something that's already hot, there could be too many of these built, and they would remain empty. And then what does that do? So I think, again, that's for each and every member to decide for themselves on the subcommittee today or the committee or on the floor. But what we have before us today is July 24th, and giving everybody quite a runway between now and then to make sure projects that are in process can continue. First speaker we have on the item, Josh Bonner, Representative Chairman Bonner. You're going to be on witness too, I think.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. So I'm simply here to advocate for my community. As y'all are aware, I represent a portion of Fayette County, which contains QTS, one of the largest data centers in the country. And while I do appreciate some of the updates that were made, I just in general, I think that it's very challenging for us to offer an incentive and then seemingly be surprised that people take advantage of that incentive to come here and do business. And I agree with my colleague, Representative Smith. We say we're putting a pause on this, but the language is pretty clear. We're unplugging it. We're unplugging this industry. And what good does it do to unplug an industry and then do a study committee to determine whether or not we want to re-incentivize the industry that we've already said we're going to incentivize, but not really. So I do think this, and not only is the impact on my community, and I'll say QTS that went into a little over 600 acres right in the center of our county, that very well could have been a nice residential mixed-use development. We made an investment in that infrastructure, and we brought in some very high-quality jobs with very minimal impact on our community. So for us, it's been a huge win. This certainly impacts our ability to attract that in the future. We have other projects that are pending, and I would be remiss if I didn't clarify on it references the commissioner issuing certificates. I'm assuming that's the Department of Revenue that's issuing those. So as an example, the QTS application has been in progress for months, and we still don't have a certificate. So, July 2024 is coming up very quickly, and things, as we know, things don't move all that quickly up here oftentimes. Sometimes they move even slower at the local level. So I would just encourage the committee to consider an extension of this sunset provision, and maybe do a study committee in the interim in order to determine, address the issues that have been mentioned in terms of power. But I do think it sets a kind of in my mind, a difficult precedent when we incentivize an industry for a long term, and then we're surprised when they show up, and we're even more surprised at how the industry works, and then we say we don't want them. So,
just in the interest of time, if you could, Chairman Bonner.
That was all I had to say.
Thank you very much. And I didn't mean to cut. I would just say I appreciate your advocacy for your community and would expect no less from a member I respect as deeply as I do you. I would reference you to go to line 12. I believe your specific situation would be taken care of except for high-tech data center or high-tech data center customer that is subject to an ongoing contract that was made prior to July 1st. I suspect if they've made that application, there are contracts, so I do not believe the July 1st date for non-issuance of certificates would apply in your situation.
Well, QTS is just one of the projects that we have in the queue in Fayette County.
But again, I would just ask, and I would say this to other members, that to look at, you have between now and July 1st to meet that exception on lines 12 through 14. To get those contracts in place. So if we let's
no doubt. My only response to that would be, as all of y'all know that have ever negotiated a lease agreement, if you're dealing with a company, a large company that could do multiple locations throughout the state of Georgia, and they see this happening in one location, they may not be real keen on doing other locations throughout the state. So this certainly we could lock in contracts, but I dare say this does send a message to the larger business community as to how to do business in Georgia. So thank you.
And I apologize, Representative Gamble, you were up at the top, but there was a couple of lines between you and Chairman Bonner, so I didn't see you. Yes, sir. You were actually the number one on the list, and I skipped you and went to Chairman Bonner because there was some lines blank. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. I know I spoke the other day, and I know there had been kind of a compromise discussed that offered a little hope that we might have a little more time to discuss this. I've got Switch Data Centers literally grading land in Cartersville right now. It's a campus of several data centers that will be built on that property over a period of time determined by them, but clearly not fully built out by the end of this sunset. And I wanted to mention one point, that it's the contract doesn't necessarily matter. It's the actual equipment purchase that is sales tax exempt. But I would request one thing of you as we have this study committee that looks into this. I think it's only fair, since we're all very concerned about energy and being good stewards of the energy that we produce in Georgia. There's been a lot of talk about the energy consumption of data centers, and that's a fair conversation to have. I think it would be also fair to look at the sales tax exemption on manufacturing and the amount of energy that industry consumes, just as a point of reference to see. We have that incentive, of course, available for manufacturing. It's good. I support manufacturing and those jobs, but they consume a lot of electricity too. So if this is a conversation about electricity, I would hope that we would look at the loads that are consumed there as well. So that's really all.
Thank you, Representative Gamble. While we go to the next speaker, I'm going to go to Dan DeRio. How do am I even close, Dan? Dioria. And I would just, while you're coming up, Representative Gamble, I understand the certificate is for the cost of the items, not the contract, but when the certificate is issued, then all the items purchased in the data center are tax exempt. So that's the reason for the issuance of the certificate. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll make it quick. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Dan Dioria. I'm the Director of State Policy for the Data Center Coalition. We did testify last week and appreciate that opportunity. Appreciate the many conversations that you all have had over the last week as we discuss this important issue. I would reiterate, as we said last week, that 2 years ago, Georgia sent a strong signal to the data center industry for long-term capital investment in the state. Many of our members have made that capital investment. And this continues to create significant risk and uncertainty in the process as those capital projects look to plan out and move forward in Georgia. And so we continue to stress that it creates that risk for our members in the state, and we'd encourage the committee, as you consider that.
We have 3 more speakers, but we're going to need you to be brief. Follow Dan's lead. Stan Jones.
Good morning. I'm Stan Jones with Nelson Mullins Law Firm. We represent DC Blocks. It's a Georgia company. It has 2 projects under development in Rockdale and Douglas counties. It has its power commitments and has filed for the sales tax exemption. It's also had bonding project discussions, actual closings with the development authorities in both counties. So I think the idea of how you write any sort of permission going forward is a little bit complicated. The power commitment lasts more than the 2024, and it is drawn down in phases. And of course, the period of time in which you prove up your investment is 7 years. So to me, I saw some of the grandfather ideas that were written yesterday, and they seem to me need a little bit more work. But we have made an active investment here. It's $1.1 billion in Rockdale, $1.4 billion in Douglas. There are phases of those projects that can't all meet the 24 deadline if that's where the committee lands over the course of the next few days. So I just want to say that we have one Georgia company that's very involved in this and would like to see the opportunity continued. It operates 2 projects in Alabama, 1 in Tennessee, and 1 in South Carolina. It's keenly aware that there are other places to go. It doesn't want to do that. It wants to stay here. Thank you.
Thank you. Sam, Commissioner, General, you have so many titles. If you can be brief, he's opening his notebook and he's a lawyer, so that's scary to me. We really need, if you can.
Absolutely. I actually prefer father more than the ones you listed, but thanks. Sam Mullins Denton's representing QTS. A couple questions. It says ongoing contract in the version. Is that ongoing contract where you've bought land? Is that a lease? What is that contract? I think that frankly needs to be clarified. I think it also needs to be clarified that if you do have the ongoing traffic before July 1, that DOR shall issue the certificate rather than have discretion in issuing the certificate. Chairman, you mentioned before that this industry was really heated. This industry's frozen at the moment due to the actions of the last week, and a lot of folks are unfortunately thinking of frankly leaving the state. So the more certainty you could put into a bill, the better it would be to at least thaw the freeze that has occurred the last week. I definitely agree with the comments about a study committee. I think that would be really, really helpful. I would just simply also cite that this is like an 18-month runway. So from the time you make a decision, it's 18 months to 24 months. This is 3-4 months in this bill. So depending on how you define contract, once again, is really, really telling. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And you're the attorney, I'm not, but I would say the limited definition plays in the hands of the people that are using the word. Mr. Woodall, we got you on the clock. You're between us and the floor.
All right, I'll
Yes,
be
sir.
brief then, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, my name is Mark Woodall. I'm the legislative chair of the Sierra Club, the nation's oldest and largest environmental group. And we're just here to support this bill. Thank Chairman Blackman. Thank the speaker for what they said at the press conference the other day. I just sat through 2 days of hearings over there at the PSC on the Emergency Integrated Resource Plan, where Georgia Power says instead of needing less than 400 megawatts by the winter of 2031, they're going to need 6,600 megawatts. As Representative Camp pointed out in the Energy Committee, that's 3 times the capacity of Vogtle 3 and 4. And so the question was from the PSC commissioners, what's going on here? They said the Georgia Power witnesses said it was 80% the data centers, and that includes the risky data centers, the crypto data centers. So these things are chewing up the grid. We got a problem, so we appreciate y'all addressing this problem. And if you want to study things, look at what Northern Virginia is talking about doing as far as requiring energy efficiency and gray water. We haven't talked about the water use, no diesel backup, renewable energy. I mean, you know, I order stuff online too, so we got to have data centers.
Thanks, sir.
Well, just we're number 2. We heard in the banking committee we're number 2 behind Texas in crypto. Almost 2,000 megawatts in Georgia, the crypto data centers just chewing up blockchain algorithms.
I like that stuff I carry in my pocket. It says good for all debts, public and private. You can have crypto if you like. I see we have no further speakers, and I'm going to recognize Chairman Blackman at this time.
I think some of the other things that, you know, our members are bringing up that, you know, in addition to the conversations that we're hearing along the power lines, is that we have two different tax incentives. We have 68 and we have 68.1. And equipment is talked about in both of those, and you have NIC codes. And there is some discrepancy when we talk about billions of dollars and the tax expenditure report that we receive and the amount of money there. So it is another thing that we probably need to look into, and I think we will. You know, I expect this conversation is going to continue throughout the balance of whatever time we have left. And, you know, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Carson, I'm going to move do pass on your bill.
Second.
I have a motion from Chairman Blackman. I have a second. This move forward, LC 500779S for House Bill 1192. We're in the posture now for discussion. You recognize Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sitting here as an attorney. I know we had a former attorney general testify, but and I don't claim to be a great attorney like he is, but I'm struggling with what ongoing contract means, and I'm curious that if the motion passes before full committee, could we get maybe an opinion from DOR on what an ongoing contract is in their mind, possibly even some ruling from the tax tribunal, so that we'll have clarity as to what that means. That we're voting on moving forward.
I think that's absolutely fair. Thank you, Representative
Thank you.
Kelly. Under discussion, number 10.
I want to echo what Representative Kelly just said, because I'm in real estate. That's what I do professionally, and I know sometimes contracts are very long regarding purchasing property or lease purchases, and this is not really clear. It's been mentioned several times on what the contract process is. Is it the contract with the land? Is it the contract with there's just a lot of ambiguity in my opinion. Thank you.
Number 3. Hang on, let me go in order. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Just a quick question. I just want to understand if this passes, then is the proposed task force, is that still going to be in effect?
We plan.
Beg your pardon?
We plan to add that in some capacity.
Gotcha.
Yes, sir.
That's it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Number 7.
All right, real quick, let's go back to the bill, line 13, and we're talking about ambiguity, but it clearly says, except for any high technology data center or high technology data center customer that is subject to an ongoing contract that was entered into prior to 24 for the lease of a portion of the high data technical data center or high technology data center equipment, and that the consideration for which is dependent upon the exemption provided in this paragraph. I'm not sure what the ambiguity is. It's pretty much stated right there what the contract, what kind of contract, and who it's with, and what it would be for.
Thank you. Further discussions?
All right, yes.
Are you 7 again, Sil?
Yeah, so just further in that point, on the contract, and this is for the author of the bill, I guess, so what would preclude company ABC from saying, okay, potential customers, we're going to build a data center sometime in the next 5 years. If you can go ahead and enter into a contract that as long as we get this data center built, that you're going to be able to place your computers, your servers in our building, would that not in fact be a contract? Would it in fact be covered as long as they got these leases in place by July the 1st, 2024?
Let me just, if I can, just in
So
the interest
that
of time,
just, I put an
that's
exclamation point on the ambiguity. in
yeah. Well,
this.
that's a good question. But again, I'm not an attorney, but it said for a lease of a portion of a high-tech data center or or data center equipment. I mean, that's for a thing. I mean, I don't know that you can enter in a contract to lease a thing that is not yet built.
They
So.
do it all the time.
I think we've taken Representative Kelly, I think he probably takes me at my word that we'll try to, look at
Yes,
that
sir.
between now and then. And I'm kind of a little bit glad to see Chairman or Mr. A.G. Olins looks like he's had about as much sleep as I have here in the last few days, Mr. Chairman. So your point is taken, and we'll work on that. Thank you very much. Yeah. Yes.
I see no further discussion on the motion. The motion is to move this on to full committee. Again, there'll be continued work if this moves forward. LC 500779S for House Bill 1192. No further discussion. All those in favor of moving this to full committee signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. It moves to full committee. Again, for the folks out there, LC 500779S. If you want to get more information and copies on that, the office can distribute that. With no further business before the subcommittee, we'll stand without objection. We're adjourned. Just a moment. We're going to recognize Chairman Blackman after the meeting. Chairman Blackman.
We have another subcommittee meeting scheduled for now. What we will likely try to do is that any bills that we were hoping to get passed, that we will move those and have any extra discussion at full committee from the Public Finance and Public Policy Committee. Mr. Chairman, if that's okay to you, we have another committee meeting that's supposed to meet right behind us. So we'll either carve out some time or we will figure out a way to get this addressed. I appreciate everybody. I know we have bill authors here that have sat around and waited a long time. My deepest and sincerest apologies. We'll get you worked out. Thank you.
No, you're fine. Call you deputies. Okay. Hey, where's the rest of the committee? Are they out there? Will you tell Game Fish and Parks to get on in here?